the thing I've found to be super powerful about future state is the experience you'll feel. What will be the experience you'll feel in the future state, not what is the work required to go to the future state. Many leaders will say, we will live in this future state if we change our lives in this case and do all this work. Instead, the future state is this is how you'll feel. When it is accomplished, let's work towards that.
Welcome to ReedFlections, a podcast on life, leadership, and learning. I'm Art Calderon. I'm here with Reed Nyffeler. Reed is a CEO of a growing global franchising security company, a father, podcaster, an author. I understand you do your own landscaping as well. Very, very busy man. And he's here to share with us his thoughts on leadership. Now, we're near the end of season 2. We've been talking about developing authentic and intentional leaders. And currently, the section we're in is leadership that lasts. Leadership that lasts. We're on future state. So we talked about create, regulate, accelerate, and currently future state. So talk to us a little bit about future state and why do leaders need to be able to imagine a future state?
So the future state is really why you follow a leader, right? If you know, the leader isn't here to help you with a past, right? You're really choosing to follow the leader. And ultimately that future state, the more clear, the more definitive it is, the more, objective that it is, the more likely you're going to choose to follow that. And so, again, if we go look at the airport here in Omaha is under remodel. And it is it's a mess. It's a huge mess, right? And it's like a 4-year process. But one of the things they do is they show you what it'll look like when it's done.
Right.
And ultimately, as the leader of that group down there at the airport, they are giving a commitment of the passengers who are going through any airport frequently to say, you know what? I will deal with this concern over time because this will be the future state. I see that there'll be this beautiful terminal that you can walk through, and it's a little more streamlined. And then there's additional restaurants that are there. There's more gates.
And
we'll
they have
more
pictures
flights.
everywhere,
They have
right?
pictures everywhere. They communicate that as well. Now, that didn't change the disruption.
Right.
That didn't change the construction. It didn't even change the timeline. What it changed was that the leader clearly communicated what is forthcoming. And then you will have a different emotional response of that future state going forward. And so that's what we have to understand is the future state is recognizing it has to be super clear because then the construction team knows what needs to happen, right? The people delivering the supplies understand how much needs to be delivered. And then ultimately the airlines that are providing service will go to a different gate or extend X, Y, and Z. And then the people that are working the TSA know that, hey, I've got this week and things are going to be changing. You have your gate agents that recognize that things may change. And then, of course, the passengers that are coming. And so that is a big project, right? And so you need a very clear future state. So the bigger the project, the more clear the future state needs to be.
Right. I've been through that airport many times, and I see the pictures everywhere, or they even have it on video. There's an idea. So you, as the consumer, I'm thinking, well, that will be better. I'll push through this for now. Now, what happens in an organization when that's not clear? When I go to the airport and it's just a big mess, and I don't know what it's about and when it's going to be done, or what the benefit is. What happens to an organization like that?
Well, first and foremost, there's no progress or delayed progress. So if you are at an organization or leading an organization and you're not making any progress, and you're like, I have all these ideas, why are we not making any progress? I mean, I'm telling them exactly what to do. And then the question to yourself you should ask is it clear to them? Is there images? Is there this video? Is there a clear future state? Is it clearly defined? And then to your point, you go through every time, and every time the photos are there. Is it repeated? Is that future state repeated? It wasn't an idea one time, right? It's repeated, and they need to hear it frequently, right? Because that future state can evolve and develop. And so you need to basically consistently communicate that, just like at the airport, right? As there's an update, hey, we're opening the new terminal. And so, I was doing research on Mount Rushmore. And beautiful project and everything else. And that's one thing that Borglum did a great job of. He sold the future state. It took like 14 years to be done.
That was the architect.
The architect was Borglum, right? And the sculptor too. He was both. And so he always talked about the future state. And he was really eloquent at doing so. And so it motivated the city that had to put all these resources in, like electricity there and all these other things. And it motivated the people that were working on it, that are in the hot sun, getting baked with their backs to the sun, grinding away at granite that doesn't make a lot of progress. I mean, you're making minor progress. And then it got the politicians that are financing it excited because they could see progressive progress as they're going through that. And he always talked about the future state, which he didn't even realize because he died before it was completed, of where all the tourists would come and go. And now it's one of the, predominant tourist sites in America in the middle of nowhere that can only really be open for about 6 months because it's super cold up there and freezing. You're not going to go stand outside and look at these faces that are not smiling. Well, they're smiling back, but they're not really moving. And so that's what the future state was. And so it's so clearly communicated. It got everybody energized and excited, and it maintained momentum. He consistently communicated that in a very engaging way. And so that's the role of a leader when you're not making progress, which is the original question. Are you communicating the future state in a clear way, and are you doing it consistently? Those would be the two things I would encourage.
Well, I think a trap of some leaders, correct me if I'm wrong, is that because I know it, everybody must know it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you did communicate it. Maybe you sent out an email, or you told a few persons, or you had a meeting, but there's always somebody who didn't get the message. Right. And sometimes it's more than one or two people. Right. Doesn't that happen a lot?
Not only does that happen a lot, but also their frame of mind is different than mine. Right. Or others that are the leader. Right. And that's why you're the leader. And so what you have to do is simplify that message. Right. They say that a teacher or a professor takes the simple and makes it complicated. A communicator takes the complicated and makes it simple, right? And so ultimately, think of that. And what are some of the most iconic marketing slogans? Are just do it. Mm-hmm. Now there's a lot to athletic performance, right? And so ultimately, if sports psychology can say, well, you need to think about this in this moment and this, that, and everything else, whereas Nike said, just do it. Hey, let's simplify it. That's a great communicator. Hey, you know what? You're more likely to win if you just do it. You know what I mean? And that's super simple, memorable, portable, right, to do that. And so if you are crafting that message, eliminate. That is the most powerful tool of the future state. Eliminate. And we can add another 8 here.
Oh,
I know you love to eat.
I do,
eat.
Yes.
Yeah. But ultimately, why? Because we're going to say, I need 25 bullet points. Nope, I need one. One that you can remember. Right? And so let's use that future state of the airport because we use that as an analogy here. I could go comb through all the details and everything else. And what do they show? One picture. That's what's showing. One picture of smiling people walking through. They have one picture of smiling people eating at the new restaurant because it's been the same ones for about 20 years, but who's complaining? They have, the smiling, attendant at each stage. Right. They show that image that is kind of iconic of what will be there when it's there. Instead of saying, we have the engineering plans all listed up for you here, and here's how much concrete is going to be pumped right into this area, and we're going to be training these people here, and that's just way too much detail, right? And so we want to simplify and eliminate things that are completely irrelevant. And then when you're communicating it, the thing I've found to be super powerful about future state is the experience you'll feel. What will be the experience you'll feel in the future state, not what is the work required to go to the future state. And so many leaders will say, we will live in this future state if we change our lives in this case and do all this work. Instead, the future state is this is how you'll feel. When it is accomplished, let's work towards that. And so those are the tips I'd give if you are trying to do that, is recognize that you need to make it super simple and visual. And then 2, communicate the experience they'd have there, not the work required to get there.
Very good. Now, talk about how a leader comes to this idea of what the future state looks like. What is the thought process that they can implement to enable to achieve that goal of knowing what that future state is?
I think the trap for leaders is they think every idea is a future state. That's not the case, right? And as things kind of come together, some ideas don't need to be a dream. Right? They're just an idea. And some dreams don't need to be a future state. And so we really need to discern that to say, is this worth it, right, to do it? And really think about that. Say, okay, is this just an idea, is a circumstance, or do I let it go? And I think one thing I've learned as a leader as I go through, as I continue to expound upon that, is some of my best ideas are ones when I decided that wasn't a good idea. I mean, we don't think about that because think of all the time and energy you're wasting on something that isn't there. Then you're emotionally and ego committed to it all.
Yeah.
And then ultimately now you've wasted tons of time, energy, and money. And some of my best ideas were saying, forget that idea. You know what I mean? And then the second is a dream. Okay, now that idea, does it have merit? And what can be attached to that? That's how we might kind of manifest a dream. And what can be attached to that? And we kind of take that idea and put it in an environment. That's what a dream is, really, right? If we think about what we dream at night, is that idea is now in an environment and it builds on top of that. And then we say that dream became a nightmare. So, this is not a dream, it's a nightmare, okay? That's going to be an absolute nightmare when I go and take that. Now there are dreams that you're like, that would be great. That's where I could visualize that. That is where we take that future state. And so then what do we do is we translate that dream into a future state is we really have 3 steps. The first is forecast, prepare, and then be aware or beware. And so the first one is forecast. And we say, okay, this dream becoming a reality, what would that look like in a future state, right? So what are going to be inherent challenges that are going to be there, right? So, obviously weather is a determinant on our forecast, right? And that's what we know. And so if we're going somewhere on vacation and we don't look at the weather, we will not be prepared, right? And so if we're going somewhere, that's a forecast, that's a future state. In future state, we're going to be in XYZ location. So then don't prepare for the environment you're in, right? We live in Nebraska, so we get a cold winter here. And typically people leave the cold winter to go somewhere warm. So if we hop on the plane and take the things in our closet we're regularly wearing in cold weather and then go to a 100-degree market, we're not going to be comfortable, right? And that is not forecasting. Instead, we want to look at what is the weather in the destination we're going and how do we need to be adequately prepared to do that. And that's a forecast. And so we're saying, where are we at now? And many people make the mistake in future state thinking about where they're at, not where they want to be. You're forecasting where you want to be, not taking steps forward from where you're currently at. So that's a forecast. Look at where you're at and what will all the things needed to be there, right? So who would be part of your organization, not who is part of your organization. Okay. Where would that be best launched or developed or things, not where are you at currently, right? How is it going to be done best at that stage, not how are we doing it now? And those are all questions you want to ask yourself about a future state so that it's super clear. Now that you have those things in your mind clarified or even articulated in some sort of plan, the next is to prepare. So an effort to do that, what would it take to do that, right? And so, as going back to our airport analogy, one of the things they've done is they first built a parking garage. And this has been done over the last 4 or 5 years, and they did a couple things with it. They expanded the parking garage for cars to be there, and they also added the approach to the airport and kind of made the roads a little bit easier. Why? Because if you open this big terminal and no one can get there and or park, how many people are going to be there? It's a bad experience. So which way do you do first? Do you manage the traffic flow well? Or for 5 years after you've expanded your airport where people are highly congested and they can't get through there, do you do that first, right? And so then you're like, wait a minute, we're going to have a better terminal and we may get more passengers coming and going. Their experience will be mitigated. We won't get the returns we want if they don't have an easy approach. And the easy approach will benefit us while we're waiting for that so that at least they can park even if they have to walk a little bit further to go through the terminal. So to me, that's saying forecasting, what does a future state look like? Ultimately, what do we need to do first? Prepare. And that in their case was get the traffic flow first, right? And how many cities, how many places have we been that they haven't thought of that before, right? And I'll give an example of where there's mistakes like that. So many people visualize a restaurant and they go look at the internal space and then they say, we need this kitchen, this kitchen. However, parking is horrific. You never go. And they're like, why didn't we get the customers? Because they didn't prepare for customers to come. They prepared the venue when they came. And so that is something to kind of weigh out when you're preparing. And so that's the second step, saying I have my forecast, now I need to prepare. I'll use another analogy, which is that vacation, right? And so then I prepare. I might need to go buy, warm weather clothing. If I'm going skiing, I might need to buy ski boots and a hat and otherwise. So I'm prepared, right? Because what happens when you get there? They charge you an arm and a leg, right? And that is inherently what happens. If you did not prepare adequately, you're paying dearly. So many projects go over in expense because we did not forecast and we did not prepare. We just started the project. We didn't realize how expensive it is, and the project may or may not get finished when we jump in the midst of it all. And so that's the second one. Prepare and do so well in advance, because it'll only cost you more later, just like buying the local things when you're there. They just charge you that forget me fee. I forgot, so it's vacation. We'll just spend it now,
Like in
right?
the gift shop.
In the gift shop and everywhere. They know exactly what you forgot, and they're going to charge you accordingly. And then the third one is beware, and be aware and beware, both of which are appropriate. So be aware of things that you didn't forecast, be aware of things you didn't prepare, and beware of things that are off track. Those are the two things you want to be aware and beware of. And so there will always be things there. And I think one thing in the future state that really compounds the problems that you need to be aware of or beware of is your emotional commitment to that future state. So if we come out and we have a particular decision, I was talking to this woman one time, and she had bought a house in a particular area, and then she had always visualized a pool, and that was her future state, was that I'll buy this house in a couple of years, we'll afford a pool. And then she was telling me we had this whole pool plan drawn up and everything else, and in her backyard there was a sewer pipe that went through it. You couldn't put the pool there. It was 3 or 4 feet, and so it's like, now what? This whole dream, this whole plan, this whole process, I can't have my pool. The yard isn't there. I have the money. I've saved up for it all. I have the plan. I put my deck chairs out there, all the things I wanted. And the one thing is, there was something outside of my control. Can't do it, right? Can't do it. And what am I going to do there? And so then she's like, okay, what do we do? Right? Do we move? Because I've been thinking about this for 5-6 years while we've been saving up and everything else. Do we try to do something different? Do we move back too far? Lot's not big enough, all these other things. Or do we just accept that's the reality? Right? And so then your level of disappointment is the only thing you can manage at that point. Because you can't tell the city to move that. And here's what happens if you are in those circumstances. Can't happen. Do you live the rest of your life thinking of what could have been? Or do you go back to the beginning? What's the next idea? How do I develop a dream? And how do I create a future state? I see so many people that started with an idea, developed a dream, get to the future state, and then at the 95% level, right? They had the plans all drawn. They were about to sign the contract for this particular pool. They had surveyed the land, and that's where it stopped. Kids are emotionally committed. You can see all of that, right? And so the question is, what do I do next? And that's where you're aware and you beware. So that's where, as the leader, if something falls flat, the team's looking around, hey, we missed that shot, coach. What do we do now? That is where then you take a new idea, you develop a new dream, and you have a new future state, and you go through the forecast, prepare, beware. You don't get defeated. We do not follow leaders that are easily defeated. That doesn't mean they take losses, or don't take losses, I should say. They do, but they're not easily defeated. They learn from that, and they forecast, and they make prepare differently going forward, and then they are ultimately aware and they're beware at the same time. And so those are the things to make a future state a reality, is walking through each of those things. And then once you're there, you want to obviously track the progress. You want to assess. And then you need to reforecast. Absolutely happens all the time, right? We can plan on going on this vacation, again, using that analogy, and a weather storm comes in, right? One year we were having this convention, and we were in southern Florida, and we thought it was going to be great, and it was not in hurricane season. And then sure enough, and I know you were there, we're like, there's a tornado coming. I was like, we left the Midwest, and there's a tornado on the beach. How often does that happen? Yeah. And so you reforecast so quickly. We're shuffling. We're watching the forecast, seeing if it's going to impact us. They made the decision, has to be inside, and we try to make the best of it. But those are things that are going to happen, and we can't let them derail us, right? They're going to happen over time, and we just kind of track that. And then we manage the things we can manage, right? Or the people, product, and processes. Those are the things that are underneath that. And so we really manage those things in order to accomplish our future state.
Now, running an organization, running a business, any sort of organization, the day-to-day, there's always people who want a minute of your time. There's always tasks. The urgent stuff is always there. How does a leader maintain that future state focus in the midst of that tyranny of the immediate?
So again, if you go back to the first season of the podcast, everything is highly organized, right? So we know where it goes. And I'll give an analogy or an example. So if you, and this is always funny because my wife has a very definitive plan where everything goes in our house, and including light switches and including, even utensils, etc. And I lived in our other house for 20 years, and I didn't know where that was because I don't live in the details, right? I live in the process. So
you leave stuff around?
No, I just open 2 or 3 drawers to think, oh, that's where it goes. and I flip 3 or 4 lights, and that's the light that's open, turns on the light here. And so I think that's where the case is. And so, but if you're highly organized, right? And if you look at a chef, or you look at, they know exactly where the item is that they need. And so then they're not worried about it. They know exactly how much, particular ingredient they have left. They know exactly where to find it. And that takes away the urgent freaking out, where's so-and-so, right? It's kind of, give another analogy. If you leave your keys, which I do, in the exact same spot every time when you walk in, literally what I do is I go inside, I put my keys in the exact same spot every single time, right when I walk in, and then I go about my day, versus not doing that simple task. So then you're running late inherently, right? And where did I put my keys? I could have put it on the kitchen table where I put it. I could have put it in my bathroom. Are they still in the pants I wore last night, right? All places we would otherwise look. If we merely took one step, I mean, it's the same place right outside the door when I walk in.
It's easy.
Every time, right?
We see that at our home quite a bit.
Exactly. And so that is what I'm saying with an organization. If I have the same routine, literally, if you go and you look at, talk to my assistant and chief of staff, et cetera, they know I have the same routine every day. And guess what happens? They organize around that same routine. And so if I have a very similar cadence, and this is all in the previous podcast. If I look at annually, and then I have a cadence quarterly, then I have a cadence monthly, then I have a cadence weekly, then I have cadence daily, then I have cadence hourly, all the way down to momentarily, it gets highly predictable. And then there's no urgency. They know what's coming next. Right. They know the minute, within a 5-minute range, I'm going to arrive at work. They know within a 10-minute range when I'm going to leave work. They know within a 20-minute range when I have my lunch. And that makes it super easy. And you take away all the urgency, and you're not hyper fixated on that task you were ill prepared for. And my level of preparation as the leader will be the organization's level of preparation, right? They are not going to be more prepared than me.
Right.
They can't be. Because I'll change the future state if I'm not prepared. And then it's a waste of time and they get disengaged. So ultimately, if you are living in the tyranny of urgency, that is you and your responsibility as a leader to get consistent.
And that should have happened earlier.
That's right.
You can't react. It's a lot harder.
And there was always going to be things you're be aware and beware of. However, you say that, hey, this is something I could not have forecasted. I'll learn how to do it better. And here's what we need to pivot. But then we'll get right back on track afterwards. Think of it like a GPS that's saying, oh, road closed. Didn't plan on the road closed or traffic accident. Those things happen, but we still get right back on the path as quickly as possible.
All right. Give us an example in your current role as CEO of this company of something that you did future state. You thought about it. You forecasted it. You actually saw it through, and now it's a reality.
Yeah, so I have countless examples of that, quite frankly, because that's maybe how I'm hardwired, and progress is important. But one we're currently going through is a complete technology revamp. And so this was 17 years ago, right? I had an idea that I said, we are going to build this on a platform of technology. And then I forecasted all the necessary parts. And so I didn't move. And part of that's preparing for that, right? Preparing the organization on that forecast. And I think that's the other issue. Many times we get hung up saying, it's got to be faster, got to be faster, got to be faster. No, we live in the future state, not because it was faster, because it's better.
You got to be patient for that,
right?
Leader.
You got to be patient because it's better, right? And so I'll give an example that is unrelated. I remember when DreamWorks and Pixar were competing, and they're both animation movies. My kids were young at the time, and the next iteration of an animation that kind of launched DreamWorks was the movie Ants. And there was a Bug's Life beforehand. And Bug's Life would have been in development and had been going through the process. And then a couple of producers or people, I can't remember the exact story, left and started the movie Ants. And so they're like, okay, we're going to move super quick and put this movie together because we didn't like the direction the other one was going. And we're going to cut some corners and get it delivered right before or around the same time to compete with that particular movie. And I remember watching that, and I said, okay, which one was better? And you can clearly see now, we look back, and there are some successes of DreamWorks. I'm not saying that's the case, but at the time, the faster wasn't better, right? Bug's Life had more critical acclaim, more global sales, more legs in the Disney, ultimately Pixar studios that became it going forward. We don't hear the movie Ants, right? We don't see it integrated into DreamWorks anymore. There wasn't a follow-up to it. Not that there was a follow-up to Bug's Life, but you didn't see that tail on that side. So there could have been a race to say, Bug's Life, we got to get ahead of it. These are the people that left us there currently, instead saying, no, let's stick with our plan. And I think that's the thing that I realized with the technology was saying, okay, I can rush this and I can get to that future state faster, but is that better? And so then 17 years ago, I had that idea. And then I'm saying, what needs to be forecasted in order to get there? How shall we prepare? And quite frankly, there's been countless people that have come and gone in that process. My future state never changed. And then ultimately, then it was the right time, right? And I remember 2-3 years ago knowing this is the time. I'd prepared accordingly. Now is the time to begin to make that future state a reality. And we began laying that plan in place. And then through that process, even today as we speak, there are some beware and be aware. That's where I'm at now. I'm like, okay, what's going to derail this? What are the challenges I need to do? How do I map people over? How do I communicate this in a way that everybody's engaged in it all? And then our future state will be realized here very shortly as the next step, honestly. Because we don't think about future state as the completion of the project. And this is, I know, the next podcast we're going to be doing. We see the future state as the reality that generations later live in, as a byproduct of the future state we visualized. If we're truly a leader that wants progress, we are not doing it for our livelihood and our lifetime. We're doing it for the future generations. And, quite frankly, as we look throughout history, we are living in a visualized future state from all the predecessors, not from ourselves, actually, because we couldn't go drive to our work if the future state wasn't envisioned in the automobile creators and manufacturers, right? So.
Very good. Future state. Well, thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our time together. Future state. That's something to remember, folks. Thank you very much, Reed, for sharing your thoughts and your ideas with us. Thank you, listeners. We appreciate you. Episode 28 coming up next time. Triplicate. You don't want to miss that one, folks. That would be the end of season 2. And in the meantime, I'm Art Calderon. Be purposeful.
If you are a leader and you want to make progress or are not making progress, that's because you have not clearly thought of a future state. And in order to realize the future state, first, you need to forecast. What would that future state be? Is this idea a dream that can become a future state? If not, let it go. If it is a future state, then forecast, prepare, and then ultimately beware or be aware of all the circumstances that are there. Then don't give up. Don't give up until you realize that future state. So many future states. The future state we live in is because someone didn't give up. They went through all of those trials and they made that future state a reality. If it is a future state that benefits all, don't give up.